Okay, here's the HPOP getting ready to go back in. These two output fittings are new. Those are from Riffraff. They do not have the check springs in them or the check valves. I just bought new ones. Fittings, that is. It comes with this O-ring on the outside. Those use Loctite. Loctite 680. I let this HPOP drain for a day or two like this, and then like this. I was doing other stuff, so I just had it drain. The instructions from Diesel O-rings and from Riffraff say you want those threads in there dry and clean. So I use contact cleaner to get those real clean, holding the pump like this while I cleaned it. Then they were dry. And I put the Loctite 680 on the first 3 threads on both of these and torqued them down. I think it was 19 foot-pounds. Plug back here, same thing. Loctite 680, new O-ring. I think similar torque, 19 foot-pounds. This one here, a lot less torque. Forget what it is. You gotta look at the instruction sheet. You want to put it in the vise like this because there's some shims and other stuff in there. New O-ring, a little less torque, pretty easy. And then the non-serviceable plug ordeal. Not really a big deal, but you got to have the ICP out. I think that's what injection control pressure valve out. So you can look down here and see what's going on right there, that little hole. And in the instructions you could see from Diesel O-rings. Thank you, Bob. Bob is great from Diesel O-rings, literally answering emails on the weekends. Fantastic. Same with Clay at Riffraff. I highly recommend working with these gentlemen. But anyway, when you put this plug in, you got to drop the ball in correctly. So I had this thing on a little homemade stand like this. You drop the ball down through the ICP entrance. And so the ball is right here. You can hear it. Can you hear it? No. But you can suck on that hole back and forth and feel that ball moving. And you got to get that ball behind the non-serviceable plug. If you don't do that, supposedly you won't build pressure, truck won't start. But yeah, I did new O-rings on the ICP. Torque down this nut. I forget what that was, inch-pounds or something. I think I might have just torqued that by hand. Supposedly these fittings here are a little bit wider diameter. Okay, so I'm gonna throw this thing in now. One more note. This plug here, no Loctite, just a new O-ring. That's a low pressure side apparently. High pressure outputs, low pressure input. The plug is high pressure, so that needs Loctite. And the other non-serviceable plug down here also needs Loctite. HPOP picture shows the fittings and plugs. 2 outlet fittings, these require Loctite and O-rings. The rear plug, Loctite and an O-ring. And non-serviceable plug, Loctite and an O-ring. This internal bypass cap or safety cap, no Loctite, just new O-ring. Pressure port plug on the back, no Loctite, just new O-ring. Here are all the O-rings that you get with the kit. I color coded them just to keep things straight and to get an understanding of what goes where before I got started. Some of my confusion was sorted out by Bob when I sent him an email. I think he responded, yeah, see, this is Saturday at 7:30 in the morning. Got back to me. Thanks, Bob. Talks about the pressure port is Allen head, passenger side, black bypass cap. Tells you what the pressure port is for and how they use that along with this black bypass plug to set the pressure. There's some shims in there and there's a ball at the bottom. So when you do the black bypass O-ring, it's real easy, but you just have to have it facing straight up and down because there's some shims and a ball in there. If that stuff falls out, you got to put it back in, and it's and he gives directions on how to do that if you mess that up. But pretty simple if you just have it straight up, pull it, put the O-ring on, put it back in. Both of those are in their own bag. Then he talks about there's only one rear plug. That is this guy right here. 18mm socket. Larger of the two O-rings in this bag is for the rear plug, and the smaller is for the fill plug located on the top of the reservoir. That's where you can, the fill plug on the top of the reservoir, that's where people drain, you pump out the oil in the top of the reservoir, get like a quart. A lot of debate out there on whether that's necessary or not. I've done it. I probably won't do it in the future. There's so much oil in the cylinder heads. But, you know, if you got the time, it's probably no harm in doing that. 4 points on the pump that need Loctite, like I mentioned, to discharge, the rear plug, and the serviceable plug on the bottom. This is from one of the diesel O-ring instructions. Talks about that safety bypass nut O-ring that I was just mentioning. Pretty easy to do, but he talks about how if you mess it up and what's going on inside there. Here's the fittings for both the HPOP and the cylinder head. HPOP needs Loctite on these threads and a new O-ring. They get torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. Fittings on the cylinder head do not need Loctite, and they need 19 foot-pounds. And so I bought all new ones of these from Riffraff, and that's nice because you can remove these check springs, and supposedly there's a little bit extra volume without those, and you don't have to rebuild the internals of these if you do it that way. A little easier. They're not that expensive. I bought this from Diesel O-Rings. This tool is fantastic for getting your high pressure oil lines off. Works really well. Here's the gasket, the new gasket from Felpro. I got this from O'Reilly's. I should have just bought this when I got all the other stuff from Diesel O-Rings. It was the same price. This is an aluminum gasket with like injected or molded rubber rings on it. And when I torque the HPOP, this thing will squish down. I don't think the aluminum crushes that much really, but this rubber, it squishes down. So that's why I went, these two bolt holes, I went in stages across both of these. Like I said, like 75, 150, then 220 inch-pounds. No leaks when I got all done, so that's good. This is where the exhaust back pressure sensor goes. It screws into here. The line below here needs to come off if you want to get this bracket out of the way to deal with this nut. Big bolt that holds the gear to the front of the HPOP. So getting this line off is a little tricky because you got the fan here. It's kind of tight. So I got a stubby, what is that, a 5A stubby, and then I put this nut and bolt combo in the end here. And so this is kind of a poor man's crow's foot. Then I could put a socket on this, and this busted this loose. Kind of a good trick, worked well. Here you can see the bolt installed into the HPOP, and here's the gear. There's the line, exhaust back pressure line. You can see here's the sensor removed. This is before I had removed the HPOP. And you can see here that the filter and gasket is also removed. I used a new one. This filter and gasket is a wire mesh filter. Here's the business end of the HPOP. That's where your bolt screws in. Loctite 680. Here are the original fittings and check springs and serviceable, non-serviceable plug. These are all the old ones. So these did not go back in the truck. These are original. Plenums installed. Look good. 2 different size screws. Side's done. Notice the bracket here. Just the oil line. These guys are just regular bolts, and then the rest are countersunk. HPOP is installed. Wasn't too bad. I used a 1/4-inch drive actually to get both these bolts, and it's like 216 inch-pounds. I did them in 3 stages, like 75, 150, and then I did 220, I think. And I got a little action on each of those, so that was good. I think that went in even. The gear is in 95 foot-pounds. I did have to hold the crank down there to get all that stuff torqued down. Here's all my weapons. 18mm on that big bolt. I used a magnet inside the socket to hold it. All these guys come in handy. 10mm right there. I did a hand torque, and then I used my inch-pound wrench. Did a couple of 3 different levels, like I said. The plenums, 2 different size. Hex heads. Here's some extra bolts from Riffraff. Use these for the bracket that has the glow plug bracket, and then these go on there if you're going to use those studs. One of the studs uses one of these, but it's thinner. You'll see that in my pictures, just because it's on a different part of the plenum that's thicker. Yeah, that's it. And this is my custom made HPOP cover. It's a piece of ABS, piece of yoga mat, and a couple of bolts. So I covered that HPOP hole when I painted it. Here's the gasket I used. That is a MAR. There's a MAR part number actually. I think it ended up being a Felpro. And here is the hold me down crank holder. 15/16. All the other weapons. Okay, we're gonna do the fuel lines next, I think. Actually, I think I'm just gonna do the passenger side fuel line. And then up pipes. Actually, I might put just set the up pipes in there, do the passenger side fuel line, then pedestal and turbo.